Hello, in this video we are going to be looking at eliminative materialism. Let's first look at a key point summary because eliminative materialism is quite a strange theory. So, all terms that characterize folk psychology can be broken down into scientific terms. Now I'm going to explain in a moment what folk psychology is, but let's just keep going with this key point summary to begin with. The operations of our minds can be re-described entirely in neuroscientific terms. So folk psychology is false. Our everyday understanding and the concepts that characterize it is wholly mistaken. And the key scholars here are Paul and Patricia Churchland. So the hope of eliminative materialists is to get us to revise our understanding of consciousness such that it would no longer be out of step with a broadly functionalist understanding of mind. However, unlike functionalism, it asks that we ditch the concepts of folk psychology. So what is folk psychology? Folk psychology amounts to the ways in which we use ordinary mental terms such as pain, anger, belief, desire, fear, and so on. Our use of these terms, according to Wilfrid Sellers, is based on a theory that we know implicitly as opposed to explicitly, that allows us to explain and predict the behavior of others using everyday mental terms. For example, Edith believes that Dennis will act in a particular way because he believes X. So it's kind of like a predictive theory. Right? Edith believes that Dennis will act in a particular way because he believes X. Or Dennis believes Moira to be in pain after she burnt her hand and cried out. However, eliminative materialists such as Paul Churchland think we should begin to focus our attention on engineering descriptions, crudely, how the thing does it. So this shift in focus is supposed to yield a more restrictive criterion for the ascription of consciousness by focusing more on what realizes the roles which are more abstractly defined. Thus, if what fills the role differs between two systems, then they can be regarded as functionally distinguishable at the realizer level. That's the how they do it, whilst remaining functionally the same in terms of what they do. In other words, eliminative materialists believe that everything is reducible to how something works rather than what it does. Thus, consciousness and our psychological states, they believe, can be more accurately re-described in neuroscientific concepts, e.g. synapses, action potentials, chemical messages, and so on. Indeed, eliminative materialists go so far as to say that folk psychology is false insofar as beliefs, desires, and conscious states do not exist. Instead, there are action potentials, synapses, chemical messages, and so on. So, as I said, the idea is to reduce the subjectivity of our natures as expressed in the concepts of folk psychology, e.g. pain, fear, and so on, to categories of science. Now, in order to make this idea a little bit clearer, let's think about how some religions explain the behavior of the natural world in terms of the actions of spirits. Okay, now, if you're interested in this, there is an anthropologist known as James Fraser, and he describes all sorts of different religious practices in Central Africa, for example. Right? The original Golden Bough is a 12-volume work, but there is an abridged version, which is only 1,000 pages long. Right? So, according to many of these religions, wind might express anger, the sea might express fury, think of Poseidon, for example, and so on. So according to these religions, or the way of thinking that is characterized by the religions, we have a very basic theory of why the natural world behaves as it does. Right? So the wind is expressing anger in nature, the sea fury, and so on. But science has shown these theories to be obviously false. Right? So eliminative materialists believe that folk psychology is similarly false in that everyday explanations that we give of human behaviour, for example, X is angry, sad, fearful and so on, because they are like the explanations given by some religions. Alright, so Churchill's argument is, as I say, that we should focus our attention on engineering descriptions, how the thing does it. We should have a more restrictive criterion for the ascription of consciousness by focusing more on what realises the roles which are abstractly defined. If what fills the roles differs between two systems, then they can be regarded as functionally distinguishable at the realiser level, that is the how they do it level, whilst remaining functionally the same in terms of what they do. So I'm repeating this part just so that it is now clearer in terms of why Churchill and other eliminative materialists think that folk psychology is false. In other words, eliminative materialists believe that everything is reducible to how something works rather than what it does. So consciousness and our psychological states can be more accurately redescribed in terms of neuroscience, so using words like synapses, action potentials, chemical messages, right? No longer are we using these kind of implicitly theoretical folk psychological terms. So let's now compare eliminative materialism to other physicalist theories. So type identity theory, as you know, reduces the folk psychology of pain to C fibers firing. Okay, so pain is a brain state. And if you want a little revision on type identity theory, there is a video in this unit. Functionalism similarly reduces the concepts of folk psychology, but to functional concepts based on the role they play in relation to the functionalist tripartite theory of mind, which is inputs, processes, outputs. All right. Now, both of these theories agree that the concepts of folk psychology, so pain, sadness, anger, fear, and so on, are things that can be reduced. They just disagree about what they should be reduced to. Now, eliminative materialists say that there are no such thing as pain and anxiety and so on. These terms of folk psychology are just expressive of a false idea. So folk psychology is false. So what objections can we now come up with to eliminative materialism? Well, firstly, and this is quite an interesting one, if beliefs and thoughts do not exist, right, so these are the concepts of folk psychology, then eliminative materialists cannot claim that there are no claims. For the concept of claim is itself a folk psychological term. And as such, according to the eliminative materialist, is non-existent. Thus, it cannot be true that anyone believes in the claims of eliminative materialism. Secondly, we use the concepts of folk psychology every day to explain and predict the behaviour of people. Right? This person is angry, they are probably going to do X. This person is sad, they are probably going to act in this particular way, and so on. So in this sense, such concepts do seem up to the task of belonging to hypotheses and explanations, and therefore are wholly compatible with scientific investigations. Thirdly, we do not ordinarily doubt that people have feelings and beliefs. If we did, it is likely that we would have our sanity questioned. So that's the end of this video. I've included some literature here on eliminative materialism for you to read through for yourself.